Got my list. Yeah, we're live. 7:08. So, kind of on time-ish. Tonight, what I want to talk about are turbos. So I want to talk about twin turbo setups. So Jimmy and I were talking about possibly adding twin setups to our turbo offerings. And we're going to expand this stuff slowly because we want to, it's not a very big company. And we want to make sure the things that we offer are going to be the things that people would want. So, the 3584 has been great and works very well. We can't wait to see it tried more often on like a 4.8. I think it's going to be fantastic for the 4.8. It's great for driving around. We're talking about singles right now and not twins. But the 3584 and a 5.3 is fantastic. And we've made, we had a customer make 730 or something at the tire. We've made over 800. We know that at the flywheel, we know it'll go more than that, a little bit more than that. Not the thing that I would recommend for that level. When guys are going up there, we normally would have them step up either. And this is something that a lot of people don't know. We have another turbo. We have the G42, which is like the 1200 horsepower turbo. So that's normally what we put people in. If you're going to go up from the 3584, you go to the G42. We have one in between there. It's a G35. And so sized more comparable, let's say it's a 100 horsepower step up from the 3584. Response, not quite as good, but better than the G42, more power potential really, if you wanted to run it. So it also works. We might only have that in a dual ball bearing though. So more expensive turbo than the 3584. And like I said, 3584 seems to do very well for a lot of stuff. The problem with it, and when we look at those three offerings, the 3584, the G35, and the G42, is that when you start doing twins of those, like we can do what we want to do are mirror image turbos, because that's the latest and greatest thing. That's really fancy. And honestly, if you're doing twins, some of the reason that you would be doing that would be symmetry. Because it looks awesome. And as mirror image turbos, it looks even better. So, I mean, let's face it. Then it looks weird. I mean, a twin turbo thing is cool. And usually, if you can package the turbos kind of out of the way, and then you could make the tubing symmetrical coming up to an intercooler, going out of an intercooler, whatever, and do that. And that looks good. The mirror image turbos kind of do that because it does look kind of wonky when you have two turbos and they're both aimed over in one direction. But we've run the thumbnail that I have up is that. I mean, it's one of the early Big Bang motors, either the 4.8 or the 5.3. And so that's what we did back in the day. I wasn't thinking that I was ever going to run mirror image turbos, but we are going to offer those. The things that we have like right now, a G42 in twins is like 22 to 2400 horsepower. That's what they'll support. So naturally, if you're not going, like if you are going there and you want to run that kind of thing, those will take you there. And they'll take you to lower levels than that too. But they're going to respond the way that 22 or 2400 horsepower worth of turbo is in twins is going to respond. Not great, obviously, on a 5.3, 6.0 better, 408, all of that better as you go up in displacement. All of that works fine. And if you look at the Big Bang stuff that we did when I ran the S475s, we had near 2000 horsepower. Excuse me, near 2000 horsepower with the turbos on that. But it's not something that, I never recommended people do that for any kind of street application because it's just way too much turbo. And most guys wouldn't be using that. If you are using that and you want to make that kind of power, you want to utilize that kind of power in that kind of turbo, in that older style of turbo, then what you would do is put a lot of stall converter, put a two-step on, do all the things that you would do in a drag race application where you would be getting the boost response up and you could go do what you need to do and make all that power. Hopefully you have a chassis to put that down and transmission or rear end and all that stuff. Obviously you would need all that. If we wanted to do twin G35s, also, 1800 to 2000 horsepower capable, because those are 900 plus or even getting near 1000 horsepower. for those G35s. So if you wanted to do that, again, more responsive now on a G35 than a G42, and a lot more responsive than those S475s. But still, you have a lot of turbo that you're working with. You have like 2,000 horsepower with the turbo that you're working with. The 3584s, again, they're rated at like 930 or 940. And so it's a lot. It's 16, 17, 1800 horsepower. It's a lot for. I think it's more than, I mean, if a guy's wanting to make well into a good bit into the 4-digit power levels, those will all do that. And so if you wanted that, we obviously could do mirror images of that stuff and make that work. But what we're thinking is, let's do something else. Let's do smaller turbos so that we can run twins that would be, I want to run twins or offer twins in mirror images that are comparable to like a single G42. Everybody talks about, well, I want to put smaller turbos, twins on there so it's responsive. And that's not, that's kind of a myth perpetuated by people talking about that, and the OEMs and the magazine guys and the video guys, and also, oh yeah, we put little turbos on there. Okay, all that's great, but most of that is packaging. If you put the right size single turbo on there and the right size twin turbos on there, you guys know we've talked about this, that they're kind of going to do the same thing. But if you put twin 1,000 horsepower turbos on there, they're not going to be very responsive, especially not in any kind of street car. But if you put two 500 horsepower turbos in there, or 500 or 600 horsepower turbos on there, then you're talking about modern turbos that also could make a lot of power. They're also sized so they're not gigantic turbos, so they're also very responsive, especially in ball bearing stuff, or not in ball bearing stuff, in V-band stuff. V-bands, according to Garrett, according to their information on their turbos, the V-band flows better than the T4 does. And so that's good. And we've seen that it's also very, very responsive. In fact, more so, I think, than the T4 if you had an equal AR. So what we're thinking of is we have a couple of options. One, we could go to a 3582, but because and we like being able to offer journal bearing turbos because they're affordable. And so people can get into them. Like our 3584 is like a $340 or $50 turbo. So it's not expensive. Like the cost of admission on that is not hardly anything. Even if you had two of them, you're talking about, $700 worth of turbos. And so we'd like to have something like that. And there are 3582s, but 3582s are, I mean, they're going to step down on the hot side, but you're still getting the same compressor. And a 3582 should be a little more responsive than 3584, but they're still, big turbos. You're still talking about 1,700 horsepower with the turbos, probably. The hot side is not much of a step down in a twin application because you're only got half of the airflow or exhaust flow from the motor feeding it. So that, it'll help, but it's just not, I don't think it's enough of a step down. So what we're looking at also is a 3076, which is a good size turbo. You can get 660s or 770s, but that size turbo is much more indicative of what, let's say a street strip guy would run. Everybody wants to make 1,000 horsepower because it's the new 500. And then Steve Morris was saying 1,500 is the new 1,000, and maybe 2,000 or 2,500 for him is the new 500. But, 1,000 horsepower stuff with turbos is not that hard to do, especially when you're starting out with a modern motor that makes 400 or 500 horsepower NA. So it really doesn't take very much boost to get you there. And in twins, we don't have the back pressure issue that we do with possibly trying to ramp up a single like G35 or something, or a 3584. You don't have the back pressure to be concerned with, so it's going to spool up, and it's not going to have a bunch of back pressure, and so it can make lots of power. So we're looking at that, but the trade-offs that we have is some of them are available in mirror image, some of them are not. Some of them are only available in dual ball bearing setups, so they'd be a little more expensive. Some of them are too big for wanting that. I just don't think that I don't know that our market anyway, for Richard Holdner Performance, I don't think our market is 2,000 horsepower guys, because you know, in judging it based on the turbos that we currently offer, and those are selling fairly well, that this 1,000 horsepower, 1,200 horsepower and below kind of range is kind of where we're at. That's kind of our sweet spot. And so that's kind of what we're leaning to. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. One of the other thing I would have to say is the low buck truck cams are back in stock. So if you're wanting that or waiting for that, those are available now. So has been our best selling cam, and for good reason. It's, you know, priced right and has really, really good, like, all around average performance. So we've purposely not been doing testing with that stuff and promoting those because they're not in stock. And so we'll start doing that more. I've got some more videos coming up. I'm trying to finish the Steve Morris video. It's just that my editing software that I've been using is not conducive to doing hour-long videos. As it is, I think I'm going to end that Steve Morris deal. He made his like an hour and 40 or an hour and 50 minutes or something. And I don't think I'm going to do that. I might break it down into 2 parts. And that way it's, you know, sub 1 hour kind of thing. I don't normally do those. My videos are normally 10 or 15 minutes. There's a lot of data there. There's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of going over the Steve-isms. he calls them that. He even has a shirt that has a bunch of them on there. But there's a lot of that information that he disseminates because usually after each run, we would go over the dyno data in comparison to the last run that we just made to see what the change was. And then he would go over the Holly data and show, you know, how much fuel is being used, where the timing is, all, you know, the boost level, all that stuff. So it's all stuff that you hate to skip. And in going over that step by step like that, you guys kind of get to be there. And that's a fun thing. I like seeing that. And so when I'm watching a video, you know, it makes you feel like you're there, and it makes you like you're going through the whole process step by step what the guys are doing. So that's kind of cool. So you guys let me know what you think about all of that. Okay. Okay, should Richard or Performance offer mirror image turbos rated at, you know, 1,200 horsepower and less? Is that where we should be focused? Just let me know. Also, just as a side note, I've been in conversations with people in comments and messages and stuff, and people have been asking about, oddly enough, I had somebody ask me about how do I what's the really cheap way to change springs? Like, what tool do you use, or what? They wanted some like hack or something, like, oh, you put this wrench over, you do this thing. I'm like, you know what the easiest way to do that is? Just when you order springs, you order a cam and springs, or just springs, order our spring tool, or order the valve spring tool. It's really cheap, and you can, you know, anymore, I don't want to be frustrated by that stuff and just try to make stuff work. Just get that tool from us or something like that. They're available from lots of people. Get that, and it just makes like doing the spring change a breeze. And especially when you're talking about putting a single spring on, where you don't have to change the seal and do a dual spring and a new thing. I mean, those are necessary for a bigger kind of cam. And that's definitely something that we offer. We offer the BTR stuff, and we will continue to do that for the bigger cams. But on a single beehive spring, or you just do that and take the old one out, put the other one, I mean, you can do spring swaps with the right tool in just like no time at all. And so it just makes your life a whole bunch less frustrating. So that's my recommendation for that. And that's what I told the guy. I said, look, I'd like to tell you that there's some secret double screwdriver wrench thing. I said, and I'm sure that there is, but that's not what I'm going to recommend. Just get this. I said, and then when one of the posts I did for Facebook and Instagram, I said, look, just you buy it. You be the guy and your buddies that buys it. And then all your other buddies are not going to buy it. And you just rent it to them. Tell them, okay, look, I'm going to let you use this because it makes life a lot easier. It turns turns a several hour job of frustration into minutes job. And so they at least better buy you pizza or beer or whatever for the rental for the tool. So if you get that, you can at least make some pizza money or something. We'll see what you guys got going on. Danny, Matthew, what's going on? If I ever went turbo, I definitely want twins. First thumbs up. Chat, you want a prize? I want to turbo my Chrysler 300, 5.7 Hemi. Those all motors like boost, so that's a good one. Did you get your head gasket fixed? Thinking of buying. Philip, you got to tell us how much power you want to make. That's going to determine what size turbo that you would get. Thinking of buying Hemi Magnum. I like those. I think that they're cool. I really like the intake manifolds on those. Sadly, no, I'm struggling with funds this month. Hopefully by Christmas I can get it right. GTX 3584 is a very universal turbo. There's a bunch of engines that it fits really nice on. Yeah, we're going to be doing with Jimmy's vehicles that he has there with the S2000 and the NSX. We're going to be doing more JDM stuff too, because as singles, those turbos are excellent. And with a K or an F or a J in the Honda side of it, or the guys that are Victory have a bunch of RBs and 2Js and those kinds of things that hopefully we can talk them into letting us test on. Those single turbos on those can get to the peak numbers that you're talking about. And a lot of those motors that Jimmy has and the guys have, certainly the stuff that the guys at Victory have, are built motors. So they're not afraid to run a lot of boost, which is what you do on a smaller displacement, lower horsepower NA version. And then you just run the pressure ratio up. And so if you ran one of these turbos and you wanted to, let's say that the 3584 was rated at 920 or 930 or whatever, to get that, you got to run it on a motor like that. And it's going to want a high pressure ratio. It's going to want not a lot of back pressure, small displacement, super high output kind of motor, KFJ kind of thing. Truck is very close now. Have to fix a Supra. It's always something. Yep. Good to hear. I'm hoping I can hustle it up on the next 2 weeks. Instead of twin turbos, have you tried running a Hellcat supercharger on an LS? Wondering what dyno numbers it will make? Well, I've run endless numbers of superchargers on LSs, so I think it's probably known what the Hellcat supercharger is capable of supporting, but the turbos will make a lot more power than a Hellcat supercharger. A Hellcat supercharger with adapters and stuff on an LS is cool because it's just a cool deal. There aren't a lot of, I don't think that those are inexpensive deals though. I have twin S368 SXRs and they're full boost at 4,000 RPM on 31. No, if that suits you, that's good. I mean, I don't know what kind of power you're trying to make and where are you maxing those out? Where boost controllers support twin turbos? Yeah, you just tee it into both of them. That's what we always do. The boost controller is just a manual one. If I accidentally oversize my turbo air ratio, can I add an auxiliary leaf blower to spec the turbo off boost? Is that going to be a really long extension cord to make that work? I need two S488s. So that's going into all of it mode. Twin G45 1600s. Yep, that'll make a lot. I know that looking at the turbos that Steve Morris had there on the kinds of things that he builds, those were lots of power kinds of things. Monkeys will walk or interdimensional vortex sphere to tread. I need the 4-bar upgrade on the LY6. I might try to find a cheap Y7 to put in place of the Y8 just until I can rebuild the D16. Richard, I'm at a crossroads. I have an LS392 with all the goodies. I have two S475s. Would you go T4 121 or T6 132? Crossroad, I have a 496 The Crossroad is I have a 486 big block Chevy dart headed, etc. Same question, T4 or T6 for full drag. Are they both S475s? And then how much power are you trying to make? On a 392, I definitely would go 121s. And I think that I would honestly do that on the 496 also. If you have a two-step or high stall or something like that, I mean, two T6s might be okay, but a T6 on an S475 as twins, I just don't think you'll need that. TN GT 3076 work really good on LS and a small block. Yeah, I like those. I've run those before. We ran those on the 5.3. Got an 88 Civic hatch. Nice. Outback needs to be fixed. I have a nice small turbo new that would be awesome on a D16. We can get it going. We feel about a 364 piston rod, 10.5 to 1 compression with twin 6262s with the .82 AR. I think it's fine as if you have enough octane in the fuel that you're running in that. 427, a pair of Garrett GT 4294s, ball bearing turbos. So you're making like big boy power on those? At a K20 swapped one, blew up. First run, sold it, had about 20 minutes. Why did it blow up? Was it a tune problem? Scrolling. Oh, K20 swapped hatch. It's a good cam stall for a 408 stroker. Eventually going to boost. GTO. Well, if you have a 4060, you're going to break that transmission with a 408, unless it's a built one. And then I don't know about the stall speed's going to be dependent on the like camshaft and intake manifold and stuff. D series are good for staying together. Do turbos come as a package? Do you mean twins? You just buy two of them together, but not a twin turbo kit. We're not doing that. We did a single because we wanted the single to be something that a guy could run with AC and all that. But when you do twins, you're not probably going to do that. Steve Moore's collab was cool. Yep, I agree. Yeah, I want to do more of that. I'm going to be flying to different places, hopefully, and doing more of that. I have an LY6 in my truck. I'm wanting very quick spool, but I don't need more than 600 horsepower. Yeah, a 3584 on a 6-liter would be really, really good, especially for 600 horsepower. 1,000 would be nice if I don't need to regap my rings. Why is gapping your rings, which you definitely should do if you're trying to do 1,000 horsepower? Why is that a no-go? Any experience with Blueprint engines? Yeah, I've run a bunch of them. They have a killer deal on aluminum 427 LS on Summit. I don't ever remember running that particular one, but I've run a lot of their motors. Would you board stroke a 350 Vortec to maximize power on a stock appearing sleeper engine? I'm considering the LT4 hot cam and a large displacement bottom end with ported and valve Vortec heads. Yeah, the bigger motor will always make more average power. So you're going to do a 383 more than likely, because that's the thing that fits easiest in that block. And the LT4 hot cam is not bad. It's not going to make you're not trying to max out the power output, obviously. And since you're putting stock heads on it, even ported Vortec heads are not going to be, this is not going to be a super powerful deal. I had a Joe Gibbs Mustang as a 4.6 with a 37 with did it have twin 3076s on it? Made 800 on pump gas. It was sick and hit 200 miles an hour. Got arrested in Texas for it on the way home. You got arrested for going 200? I like the Magnums. Was looking for one to LS swap, but found one priced right with a good running Hemi. Yeah, I don't think I would do an LS swap in that unless it didn't have a motor in it. I mean, the Hemi can make LS power anyways. It's got really good heads on. It's got really good intake manifold. Just needs a cam. I like to boost it. Main custom, trying to save it for as a standalone. I've got a Hellcat blower for my LQ4. What would you recommend for ring gap? Stock bottom end. I only plan on running 10 pounds. You do 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. So go 24, 25, 26-ish on the ring gap. And I would put head studs in it. And I wouldn't do budget options. Well, I mean, you're just going to get MLS gaskets. You're going to get Fail Pro or LS9 gaskets. They're not very expensive. My Supra has me aggravated enough to sell and get a C6 blower car. What year Supra is it? Stock 0353 twin 3582s, 93 octane, 500 wheel. Yeah, if I was doing 500 wheel and I was trying to run 93 octane, I wouldn't pick those two turbos. Those are way too big for that. Yeah, you just need to get a can of Act-Right. I have a 408 small block Ford making 500 crank horsepower. Is your big turbo the right one to make 1,000 wheel horsepower through a manual trans? Yeah, a G42 will definitely do that. I don't know what size the turbo is. I always needed bigger for V8s. I took it in trade and just sits there. Pay shipping. I'll send it to you. And that's good. Went from twin 6766s to twin 7070s on a 4.8, hoping to be around 26 to 30 pounds, 1,000 wheel capable. I'm guessing. Yeah, I don't know exactly which ones, but 70 millimeter turbos should certainly be capable of that. I know when the older GT45 that I ran on everything, it was a 69 millimeter wheel on that, and that would do a single one of those would do 750 or something. So, have you seen Ace's fuel injections? I've seen them. I've never tested one. 88 Super, almost like brand new. Everyone that sees it says it looks nice inside and out. Back to the 364, the twin 62s. I have a 3400 stall. Okay, that's enough to get high inlet air temperatures in the quarter. I don't have an air-to-air intercooler. I feel like I'm going out of the efficiency of the turbos. These are ball bearing VSRs. Why don't you have an intercooler on it? Best turbo and cam combination for a Gen 5 L86. Well, you got to tell me just what the power output, what the desired power output. And then my question to you is, how are you going to get enough fuel to it? Got a $250, 30,000 mile Gen 6 big block Chevy. If I swap Gen 4 101cc closed chamber oval port heads to get 10-to-1 compression with a good cam carb and intake, would it make 500 wheel horsepower in a 4-speed car? No. A Gen 6 big block Chevy already has 102cc chamber heads on it. So the heads that you'd be putting on it aren't going to gain anything. It has oval port heads, very, very small chamber oval port heads from the factory on a Gen 6. And they're standard size oval ports. They're not peanut ports. So while they're not fantastic, I don't think that they flow. Although I'd like to see that. I don't know how they flow compared to like an 049. But 500 wheel horsepower is 600 flywheel horsepower. And getting that from a 454 takes a lot. I have 62 on my EcoBoost. 2.3 stroker race setup. It makes 800 horsepower, but also 800 foot-pounds of torque on E85. Yeah, getting the torque is just a matter of getting all the boost down low. I do have one intercooler. But didn't you tell me that you didn't have an intercooler? Do you have an air-to-water intercooler or something? Would a Gen 5 M90 with a 2.5 pulley be too small for an LY6 with a sloppy stage 2? Yeah, you're not going to make a lot of power. I mean, that spinning that blower with a really big inlet. I mean, we cut the inlet off and put a big inlet on it and a big throttle body and ported it. The guys from Jokers ported it. And we have a 2.5 pulley or 2.4 pulley on there. And when we put it on a 550 or 540 or 30 horsepower 5.3, it made 650. So it will support that kind of airflow. But on a mild 6-liter, you're not going to get there though. And you're not going to get there without porting and with a stock inlet on it. What brand air-to-water intercoolers do you typically use? Well, we have our own that we're using in our kit, but I've run lots of different ones that are available through CX Racing and various people. Superchargers are for pure torque, turbos are for horsepower. That's not accurate. I've seen turbos make a lot more torque than superchargers. 700 wheel horsepower target, and how would you go about fuel? I was thinking 20-pound bigger injectors and hitting the road. A converter is obvious, but I'm looking to spend a minimal on the transmission. If this is about the Gen 5 motor, you can't put, I mean, there are bigger injectors for a Gen 5, but they're LT4 injectors. And then you have to put a bigger pump in it and all of that. It's a lot. At what power level NA does a stock LS3 style intake and throttle body become a restriction? Well, it's more nuanced than that. It's not where it becomes a restriction. Even on a stock motor, if you put a short runner intake manifold on there, it could make more peak power than an LS3 manifold does. So if you put a high ram or a Super Victor or that kind of thing on there, it could make more peak power, but that doesn't mean it's a restriction. That just means the power output, where the runner length and everything with that manifold, where it's designed to make power, it's just making power there, like if you put a cam in it. And then so the bigger intake manifold, bigger short runner intake manifold that's designed to make power at a higher engine speed will do that. And it will oftentimes make more peak power, but it'll make less power everywhere else. So ultimately you have to decide, like, where do you want to make the power? How much power can an LQ9 board to 6.2 with forged pistons and rods hold? I would never do that for boost. I would strongly recommend not doing that. If you want to do an NA motor and you just want that displacement, I mean, for me, I'd rather just put a 4-inch crank in it and keep it at a standard bore or near a standard bore, maybe 30 over, but I wouldn't ever take it out to a 4125 or a 4065 bore. I wouldn't do that. And I certainly would never do that for boost, because you don't need that. You just need another pound of boost, and it took care of all of your now thin bores, your thin sleeves. It's possible to over rev a supercharger where it gets outside the efficiency curve. Yeah, it's very, very easy to do that. You can destroy the bearings and you can destroy it, how well it makes power. We saw that on the AMR blower. Overspeeding the AMR blower just destroyed it. What happens sometimes is that the rotors will get really, really hot, and they'll get growth, and then they'll touch. I've had good luck with Mishimoto. Yep, we've run theirs. Stock LS3 can get a cam upgrade and go to 535 horsepower. Yeah, you can get more than that at the flywheel. Fair enough. I thought the superchargers in general make better low-end power over turbos. It depends on how you size them. But if you might be talking about it makes immediate boost, and so that it makes more torque at 2000 RPM, but that's not where it makes peak torque. The turbo will already be spooled up before you, if you size it correctly, before you make peak torque. And the nice thing about the turbos, as opposed to any kind of supercharger, like on a centrifugal blower, the turbos will make way more torque, because centrifugal has a rising boost curve. So it will make peak torque out near where it makes peak horsepower because it has a rising curve. But turbos don't do that. And a positive displacement blower doesn't do that either. It doesn't have a rising curve like that. It has a little bit of a rising boost curve. And it also has usually short runner manifolds, and you don't have to do that on a turbo thing. So, but you have to expend energy from the motor to drive the superchargers. So if that costs you 100 horsepower to drive the supercharger, not an unreasonable amount in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it can be way more than that. But if you drop 100 horsepower off of that, and the turbos and the blower are making the same boost, the blower is going to be down 100 horsepower at least. And that means a lot of torque also. Have you tried the Dart LS Next block? I have not. Twin turbo small block Ford with 1,300 horsepower with a 4L80. Would you recommend a lockup or non-lockup converter? Are you also driving it on the street? Is it a driver? And I don't know that you're going to get, and are you using the overdrive gear? Because I don't know that you're going to get a lockup converter to hold that. Properly sized turbo setup can easily be superior to a blower. There's no bad choice there, but they do what they do. Let me ask you this. You're looking for a choppy weekend vehicle and a crew cab 1500 with a Gen 5 L86. How would you build it? NA boost, just enough horsepower to keep on the road. Well, if you have a Gen 5 L86, you can put boost on it, but it's not going to be inexpensive. Because of the fueling situation. You could get the LT4 stuff. You could get the LT4 injectors, the LT4 pump. You're going to have somebody tune it, but you're going to have to do that anyways. You could put a BTR Truck Norris camshaft and springs in it, and then some sort of turbo setup for that. I don't know who does turbos for Gen 5s, but I would imagine that there are people out there who have done it, or you could do it yourself. And then that could make a lot of power. It could make as much power as you have available fuel. So how much ever fuel supply that LT4 pump, injectors, and then when you buy a camshaft like the Truck Norris cam, it's also going to have a bigger fuel lobe on the cam that drives the pump. So you'll have extra fuel flow from that, and you'll also get a bigger supply pump feeding the high pressure pump, so the in the tank one. So you'll do that. It's just more elaborate than doing it with an LS. But you can certainly make whatever that fuel system will supply. I'm thinking it's 800 or 900 or something like that. For now on the GTO, can I get away just swapping the cam? No new pickup. O-ring, no new oil pump. Just pull the stock cam sprocket and install a new cam and use the chain. Yeah, when we do junkyard stuff, you're going to have to, if you put a cam in, you're going to have to get springs. You'll definitely have to do that because almost all the cams will require springs unless you get a no springs required camshaft. And you can do all that. You can usually reuse all of the other stuff. There's nothing to be concerned with about an oil pump or any of that. And that you don't even look at that stuff. You just take the front cover off. If it's an LS, you take the front cover off. Take the damper off, take the front cover off, take the water pump off, take the cam retaining plate off, take the timing gear off, rotate the cam. Hopefully the lifters all hold up and that you have good trays still. You'll have to take the rockers off, the push rods. You take the old cam out, put the new cam in, put all this stuff back on. It's not hard. Non-lockups get hot. Yeah, that's for the street. That would be fine. You just at 12 or 1,300 horsepower. I don't know how the lockups will manage that at that power level and lock up like at wide open throttle. I don't think that they will. But for street driving, when you're not at wide open throttle and you're at part throttle and you're just cruising around, a lockup is a really good idea. I know you play with GT45 DNA turbos. What size piping would be good for 1,100 horsepower and twins? That's not really a concern. Again, the piping, the tubing, at least the cold side stuff, the hot side stuff, don't worry about. You just have header, have 2.5 inch pipes going to the turbo or to each turbo if you want two of them. Because if you're going to make 1,100 horsepower, you're going to have two of them. The tubing going to that, and then the discharge tubing coming out of the turbo is going to be small. You could get away with, dual 2.5s feeding your intercooler or whatever you're going to feed. If you want choppy power, add boost and screw up the idle control for chop. Australia's in the house. I just saw that. I keep shredding serpentine belts on my turbo 6-liter. It's almost like brake dust particles all over my accessory brackets and pulleys, mainly on the power steering and alternator side. Well, I would take the belt off and spin those accessories and see if something's like stuck. See if something's frozen, because you're getting belt slippage and you need to figure out why. And if it's all the stock front accessory drive, usually something's dragging. I bought a 177 blower with no intake. Could I do like you did with the Buick and put a 1/2-inch plate on a small block Chevy Super Victor? Would it make more power getting the 177 intake? No, I don't. I think it probably would make more power if you could you'd have to put a box on top of it, because it would have to blow into a box, because I don't think that the discharge from that 177 would position itself directly over where the carburetor inlet is on a typical 4-barrel manifold. So you'd have a box underneath the blower. It's not going to be very high. And then the box would have an opening wherever the carburetor is, because you have to position when you're doing the blower on the box and then on the carburetor, you have to position the blower so that the pulley lines up with however you have your crank drive set up. I may have missed it in the live with the pop-ups. 1,200 wheel horsepower, 2-step, 5,000 stall converter with 355 gear sets for both the LS and big block Chevy route possible. 373 for my previous question about T4 or T6. I don't think any of that makes a difference. I don't. You're obviously with that much converter in it, and then how high are you revving it? You're not going to have at 1,200 horsepower. T4s in twins are going to be way more than enough. BTR hot rod cam uses 660 springs. I don't remember what the lift was on that cam. Yeah, 619, 607. You could use 650s or 660s. How much horsepower with 1,000cc injectors and a 535 pump support? The 1,000cc injectors will support more than the 535 pump will. So that's going to be your limitation. If you want to get everything out of 1,000cc injectors, you'd have to have 2 of those pumps. I really need to choose what hobby I want to do. Horsepower in my trucks or shooting guns. Yeah. There's no cheap date there. I might pull ahead. I've done a couple. I also use your method with the rods holding lifters. Yeah, that definitely helps. Keep it up, and thanks for all the help. 20, I've bought, built, and sold 16 vehicles, and having someone as concise and consistent. Happy to help. That's a lot of vehicles, especially at 20. What's a good setup for a junkyard 5.3 and an S10 goal to make 700 wheel horsepower budget if possible? Cam, springs, injectors, pump, turbo. Just do what the guy did on the video that I did with his S10. He went 9s in his with a single 3584. LS crank dampeners are different between car and trucks. Yes, they are. The offset's definitely different, and the whole design is different. Factory 4th-gen accessories pulleys. It's on 15 pounds of boost, so I assume it's just too much torque for the factory setup. The torque output has nothing to do with the front accessory drive. The accessory drive won't slip unless you have something that's stopping it from spinning. There's a Specific clearance that must be heated between the dampener and the end of the crank. Is your damper spinning on the crank? Because we've seen that. We usually pin them. So we've seen you could take the damper off, and in fact, that's happened to this L33 that I have. The damper spins on the crank. That's not good. It galls the crank up usually. Use an AM variable speed A1000 pump. Yeah, and they who is it? Aeromotive has big brushless pumps. That's the one that we use on the Westec dyno. Damper was replaced when I built the bottom end. Never had this issue before. The gap that they're talking about is when you're putting the bolt on. The two can't be flush, otherwise there has to be some press. Otherwise, the shoulder of the bolt, which it looks kind of like a washer, but it's a shoulder bolt, will not basically hold the damper in place on the crank, because it's a press fit, but it's also held by the bolt, which is why we like to pin them. And then that bolt has to be really, really tight. 250 foot-pounds or something. We go to the scrapyard. Do you grab a small block or anything else? Should that say when you go to the scrapyard? Thanks for the information. Trying to cover all my bases. Do some give and take on my setup. Transmissions set up like that when I was running a nitrous big block Chevy. Okay. Do you recommend sleeving the LQ9 to 6.2? Yeah, what I recommend is why do you want to go to the 6.2 displacement? You shouldn't do that if you're running boost. There's absolutely no reason to do that. You can achieve the power output that you want without having to go through any of that sleeving or making the motor bigger. Is a D-stroke 4.8 crank 6-liter boosted even worth the time? Bought it without knowing it was D-stroked. Yes, every LS motor, regardless of what displacement, can with a turbo can make whatever that turbo has to offer. So if it's 1,000 horsepower turbo, that combination will make 1,000 horsepower. So instead of thinking it as a D-stroke 6-liter, think of it as a big bore 4.8. So go into this thinking this is a 4.8, but it's got a much bigger bore. It's got a 4-inch bore. So this is awesome. This is an awesome 4.8. It's a bigger displacement 4.8, so it will do more than the 4.8 does. And we all know that turbo 4.8s can make a lot of power. They just take a little bit more RPM, a little smaller cam, and all that. Do you still have the LY6? I do. Takes a good week or so of driving for it to destroy the belt. All the police feel free. Just checked while watching. The straight edge on the crank and the pulleys. Yeah, you could check and see if everything's aligned. I still think something's slipping or locking up. Can I reuse my lifters if they look perfect? The lifters that are in my L33 and in almost all of the Big Bang motors were the original lifters that came in the junkyard motor. And dozens and dozens of these junkyard motors that I've run all ran with the original lifters when we did camshafts with them. And this L33 has been to 7,800 a bunch and already had more than 200,000 miles on it, and now has over 900 dyno pulls, all with the original lifters. When I go to the scrapyard, I very rarely do I get small block Chevys. Although when I was doing my TV show, when we were doing the Wheel of Death, we got small block Chevys. We also got small block Fords, and I have gotten a few of them because there are things that I needed to get done specifically, but mostly other kinds of motors. Have you ever done any testing with the longer tube cast manifolds they had on early LS GTOs? Got a set for a 6-liter. I'm putting in my wife's Land Rover. I didn't know that I don't know that much about the different. I mean, I know that there's a whole bunch of different style factory exhaust manifolds, but I don't know anything about those. Would you ever do a step-by-step on a DIY turbo installation for an LT? No, because I don't do LT stuff very much. And I don't have one. Belt too tight or too much heat. When running a turbo on a carburetor, excuse me, should you use an intercooler? Yes. You should always try to run an intercooler. You still plan on doing a 4-bar completion on the LY6? That LY6 is not going to be able to do that. That LY6 has something going on with it. I don't know if it's leaking. It's leaking water into the motor. And I don't know if it's the heads yet or if it's the block. Have the belt lined up. No problem. You think a 1-inch tall box would suffice? Yeah, I don't think it needs to be any bigger than that. It just needs to be able to, for the boost to go in, and then it's going to have to go from front to the back or whatever direction it goes, wherever the blower opening is relative to, and it might be that blower just goes directly straight down from the top with a carburetor mount on it down to the bottom. I don't remember how big that opening is, but it's almost assuredly going to be bigger and different shape than the carburetor entry is on a typical 4-barrel carburetor. So you have to just allow it to all go in. I'm going to say it's your alternator burning belts. Belt has an auto tensioner, so it shouldn't be too tight or too loose. Yeah, it is spring loaded. My crossover pipe is right in front of the water pump pulley, so that could be a possibility. Yeah, if that's getting hot, you're getting belt temperature. Of an L33 and a few 6.2s, want to put together a non-prep turbo S10. Which would you use? I would use an L33. I wouldn't use a 6.2. We don't ever run the aluminum LS3 style blocks with lots of power. An L33 you can run with lots of power, and even more so, I think, with a. I don't think that the L33 is a Siamese bore deal. Tensioner can be sticking or belt continue. Wonder if they make slightly more torque. Oh, you're thinking? I don't think that they would, because you have if you have a full exhaust after that, I don't know that would make a difference. I have a nice LY6 6-liter in my Fox body, Power Glide trans, like your opinion, turbo size for street driving. My goal is 800 wheel horsepower, something that spools right now. You're in no man's land at 800 wheel horsepower. You're going to get a G42. And I don't know what converter you have, but a G42 on a 6-liter is going to be really, really responsive, because we drove around in Jimmy's truck in the Tahoe with a 5.3. And the G42 was more than fine. Richer engine coolant. No, Dan. I was talking about the Big Bang 6-liter. It's getting water when we run it. It's getting water in the oil, and I don't know if it's coming up through the head studs area or if there are leaks in those heads or what the deal is. 6.2 from a Yukon 2008 aluminum. I took it to a machine shop. They told me my block needed to be honed at least 10 thousandths and that it might not fix, but for sure at 20 thousandths. I don't know that you can go that much on aluminum block. Maybe we need to source a replacement LY6. Yeah, I don't think you can go 20,000s on those aluminum blocks. Is it hard to find bigger pistons that will fit the 6.2 when it's bored out 20,000s? Yeah, that's not the problem. Is that you don't have enough. The sleeve that's in there is not. It's not thick enough to go to bore it that far. Plan on offering a cam similar to Summit Stage 4 truck cam at any point soon? I don't know what those specs are, but no. The answer would be no, because we're not coming out with any other LS cams right now. 6 tool spool, more turbo, plenty of guys have made lots of power than LS3. Nobody I know makes the really high horsepower stuff with an LS3. I have full exhaust on my twin 30 GT45s. It runs the same as when I had dumps. Okay. My 630 LY6, what AR should I have with a factory cam on that 3584 for 600 horsepower? It's going to be, I think I would get a 121 on a 6-liter. The early LS engines would crack the heads near the valve spring and leak coolant into the oil. These are aftermarket heads. They're trick flow heads. So it's not a factory head. I'm still concerned about that. I'm concerned about the area that I'm concerned about on the heads is are the pads, the machine pads for like the head bolt and head studs. Those areas crushing and getting into water is where I'm concerned with it. Can we still get tuning files? Yeah, we have tunes available. My 6.2 is bored to 8.8. That's pretty big bore size. Yeah, a 6-liter, you should run a G42. So let's see. Should RHP offer mirror image turbos rated at 1,200 horsepower and less? 88% saying yes. Yeah, I was really surprised when I went out there and Jimmy had the G42 on the Tahoe, how responsive that turbo was. I thought this is like turbo stuff that I remember driving around with. I'm like, I thought that turbo would be kind of big for that, especially something with a stock converter, but it was not. It worked good. The 3584 and the 5.3 is ridiculous, ridiculously fun. Do the eBay GT45 turbos, like in your test video, have enough steam for 600, 700 wheel horsepower on 93 octane? They have enough for that as twins, but not as a single. Harry, I think on a 6-liter, I think 600. Is it 600 wheel horsepower? If it's 600 wheel horsepower on a 6-liter, I would go with the G42. If it's 600 flywheel horsepower, then I would stay with the 3584. Or maybe a GT35 or a G35 rather, not a GT35, a G35. And then you could go up from there, which everybody will. Everybody goes up. The also those GT45 turbos are not very responsive. I run twin GT45s, 94 octane at 10 psi, running 15 timing Made 65 to the wheels. That's pretty good. That's good power. Just flywheel horsepower. My 6L90 won't be happy with more than that. Okay, so if it's 500 at the tire, you could do that with the smaller turbo. I thought I'd be good with 10 pounds on my 6-liter. That didn't last. No, and that's why and we talk about that all the time. And I was just talking to somebody else about that. Oh, my neighbor. I'm like, yeah. He goes, yeah. I just want to. His cam was too big, and he had a high ram intake manifold. It's like a 5.3, and I'm like, yeah, it's just like it's like a 237 cam. I'm like, yeah, it's gigantic. That's all the wrong things, and I think it had a stock converter in it too. I'm like, yeah, it has all the bad things on it because it's a truck that he bought. He said, I'm going to put this turbo on. I'm going to put I think he had a VS Racing turbo or whatever. I'm going to put this thing on. I go, okay, that'll be good. And I said, are you just going to put just a line going to the wastegate at 7 pounds and just driving around? Because I'm going to put a controller on. I said, I know you are. I said, just drive around 7 pounds. He won't. Nobody will. Nobody does that. What insight do you have on head flow and runner size in relation to air volume, such as RPM? I don't know what you're asking. 5.3 flows about the same CFM at 8,000 CFM as a 6.2 at 7,000 RPM. What effect velocity would play at higher RPM? I first of all, I don't agree with your assumption that a 5.3 flows the same as a 6.2 at those RPM rates, because you have to look at the power output of each one of those motors before you can make that assessment. And I don't know why you're concerned about velocity at those. Well, why are you interested in that? If they're making the same airflow, couldn't they make the same power then? What do you think about the Hellcat superchargers that putting on LSs? I think it's fine. I think putting boost on an LS is always a good thing. So no matter what you're putting on there, whether it's the Jaguar or Range Rover ones, or we put an M90 on a bunch of them, 112s, 122s, any of those, they're all good. 1,200 horsepower. You want that small and a mirror twin setup. G25 660? Do you mean G35 660? Is there a reason gasoline engines typically don't have compound turbo setups compared to diesels? Is it compression, an AFR thing, maybe RPM? There's oftentimes no reason to do that. I mean, we can make the power that we need to make without a compound setup. And diesel engines typically want really, really high pressure ratios if they're really trying to make a lot of power out of them. Can you sponsor a turbo? We can't do that. We are not a big company. The worst part is when you're redoing your fuel system because you maxed out what you thought you'd be satisfied with. Well, that's what we tell people. When you're picking injectors, pick the injectors not for what you have or what you want, for what you could want. Because putting 1,000 cc injector in there is don't pick a 50. Pick a 100, and then you have to decide if you want a 1,500. But at least 1,000. That's a new go-to thing. So then you could make some fairly good power. The thing is that with pumps, like a single 525 or 535 pump is not going to be enough to feed 1,000 cc injectors. You need 2 of those. If it runs as good at 7, yep. Try 17. You said, wow, that escalated quickly, Dan. Or 40 pounds or whatever, yeah. Goal is 600 700 wheel horsepower for the turbo 5.3. Yeah, that's really easy. That's just a cam and springs and tune and injectors and pump and turbo. That's really easy. Because of claims of head being too big for the displacement, doesn't make sense when the engine is run at higher RPM than stock. Well, I don't know. Like too big and all of that stuff is just it's just nonsense to me. I mean, I've run tests on port volume, and the videos are up on port volume. So I don't know where I would be concerned with head flow and some attending port volume. I'm less concerned about port volume than I am about head flow and whatever the desired power output is. So you need a certain amount of head flow to make a certain amount of power. And then what are all the other things that you have to do that? Like you can't take a stock 5-liter Ford head that flows 157 CFM and go, I'm going to make 600 horsepower with that head. And I'm going to do all these other things, unless one of those things is boost or nitrous. You're not going to do that. So you have to have the flow first. That has to support the power level. Then you got to do all the other things. Then you got to do compression or lightweight components or the right intake to get it to run at the RPM that you want to run at. All the right headers, the right oiling system, all of that stuff that you get to make really high specific outputs. I don't consider port volume when I'm doing that, but I don't build cup engines or pro stock engines or any of that stuff. I have a triple turbo Cummins. That's my daily driver, so I'll be easily able to keep it at 600 horsepower without the need for more. There you go. Best way to NA build an LT, stroker kit, and a cam. Yeah, there are stroker versions available for those. And if you look at what they're doing on some of the NA builds on these LTs, they're making a lot. If you're talking about a modern LT, a Gen 5 motor, they make lots of power, like lots of power. Stock 0353, stock cranky, garage, some pistons. How long will it last unbalanced in your opinion? I wouldn't even put it together if it wasn't balanced. I wouldn't even run it. And I wouldn't even put it in a vehicle. Because if you've ever had an unbalanced motor, it's awful. I've had really bad ones. We've had some on the dyno where we put them on and it was so bad. It's just, we were worried about breaking the dyno. So I wouldn't run it if it's not balanced. Can you piggyback double injectors off the same harness? I don't know. I don't know if the drivers will be happy with that. Compound spreads pressure ratio over 2 stages, preventing overwhelming the intercooler with heat. Yeah, you can have an intermediate intercooler, but if you have 20, 30, 50, 100 pounds of boost coming out of going into the motor, going into the intercooler, it's still got its work cut out for it. BTR equalizer intake installed on a 5.3 truck. What's the issue with installing one on a truck? Well, it's not a good intake manifold for a truck because it's a short runner intake manifold and it's designed to make power at high RPM. And usually trucks don't want that. Usually guys with trucks want power to happen in a lower RPM range because that's going to sacrifice a whole bunch of torque is what's going to happen. What size turbos do you see are best for a twin carbureted motor? I wouldn't give I can't give you an answer for that because a twin turbo 5.3 carbureted doesn't tell me anything. What I would need to know is how much power you want to make. The size of the turbos are only dictated by how much power you want to make. Well, primarily, let's say. The fact that it's carbureted doesn't matter. It wouldn't make any difference if it's carburetor or fuel injected. If you want to make 1,000 horsepower and we have twins, then we need at least 2 turbos that are capable of supporting 500 horsepower. And you probably would put 600s or 650s or something like that on there. Who needs torque? Okay, on Honda B series engines. Hondas have pretty good specific torque outputs. Especially when we made them, when we did 2-liter B series Honda engines, those were nice. Those actually had 150, 160 foot-pounds of torque at the tire, so they were pretty nice. We have a compound turbo setup on our big truck. Low RPM engines utilize compound setups. 14-liter Detroit 60 makes 950 horsepower, 3,700 foot-pounds of build. Yeah. Yeah, and they can do that. They have the strength, the internal strength, the motor strength to do that. And then you can run lots of pressure ratio and since you're throttled by fuel, you can get enough fuel to it and really, really good things happen. Gas engines are not designed to do that. What size push rods for a BTR hot rod cam? Do you mean what length push rod? That's not just dictated by the cam. That's dictated by the head and stuff too. Can a bad crankshaft blow out a rear main seal? A Well, if the back of the crank that spins on that rear seal is chewed up, it can destroy that seal and then that can leak. I don't know how you get that chewed up like that. Usually it's a fairly nice mirror finish. So I don't know how you would get it, but yeah, that's possible. A broken crank can do that. We've seen 5.3s make 450 horsepower with easy with stock heads, but could these heads do 450 horsepower at 9,000 RPM with the right cam and valve train on the same heads? Well, it's not going to make it at 9,000 RPM on it's not on a 5.3. It's not going to do that, because if you get the motor run at 9,000 RPM on a 5.3, it's going to make a lot more than that. Are you talking about doing that on a smaller motor? As you go up in RPM, the motor needs more airflow to make power. But if you go down in displacement, it needs less airflow. So I think you can make that if you have a head that flows that amount enough to support that, I think you can do that at a higher engine speed. Yeah, the airsoft is right. There's a lot of things that change. The camshaft base circle is one thing, but then everything then attached to that, the lifter, the push rod, the rocker, the valve stem height. I mean, all of that stuff is going to affect it. The cylinder head, the head itself, and then also where on that head, where does it mount the rocker assembly relative to the deck surface? Because that distance is going to change what the length of the push rod is. MSD Blaster 2 coil mounted horizontal street strip work okay, or get an HVC type Blaster SS strong enough? I think the coil itself is probably strong enough. I don't know if they like to be laid over like that though. Is that thing oil filled? Will it leak like that? I meant deck and head machining. Yeah. On that note, it is time to go. I've been here. I'm already here late. Why are you guys keeping me here so late, man? Thanks for showing up, and thanks for answering the poll question. That's important to us. We like to get feedback from all the people before we make major decisions. I'll see you guys all tomorrow.